All right. So if there was a point in your meetings with your clients where you were either leaving a lot of money on the table or maybe even losing the project altogether, wouldn't you want to know what that point was and what you could do to fix the problem? So there's actually 3 questions that can come up and that almost always come up in almost every client meeting that I've ever been in. And if you handle these 3 questions either in the wrong order, at the wrong time, or in the wrong way, then you can leave all kinds of opportunities just out there unattended to. You could even potentially lose the project altogether. So let's talk about what they are and what you can do about it. Now, as a point of reference here, these 3 questions, 2 of them are questions that you might ask, one of them is a question that your client might ask, but none of them have anything to do with malice or nobody's trying to be mean to anybody or anything like that. It's just it's a thing that can just be a natural outflow of what's going on in the meeting, but it's also the kind of thing that really derails the entire process. So let's talk about what it is. The first one is, have you ever been to a meeting where you sit down with your client, and after talking for a minute or two, and right when you're really ready to begin to dig into the meat of the meeting, then you ask the question, all right, so tell me what you want your website to do. And then, of course, the expectation is your client then tells you what they want the website to do. And of course, here's why that's one of the questions that can totally derail the whole meeting right from the get-go. And that's because your client doesn't know what they want their website to do. So when you ask that question, it assumes a couple of things that are big problems. It assumes that your client is now going to be leading the meeting and telling you what they want you to do, and that kind of puts you in the role of saying, okay, yes, I can do that, I can do that. And it's sort of like they're interviewing you to see if you can do the things that they're looking for. And so that kind of puts you into, a technical skills kind of role as opposed to a business development leadership kind of role. So that's one of the big questions. So if you ask, what do you want your website to do? And then your client comes back and says some things, one of the big problems is it puts you in the wrong position in the meeting. The second thing is your client doesn't know what they really want. And so that's another big problem, because if you try to, build a website based on what they want when they don't really know what all the options are, then it's you're not really bringing anything new to the table. And so that's one of those things that kind of derails the meeting at that point too, because oftentimes, almost always, the scope of the project that they have in mind is smaller than what they actually need or what they might want in the future. So wouldn't it be better if you could offer things that would be helpful to them, as opposed to waiting for them to offer things, to just, basically interview you to see if you can do those things. So that's one of those questions that really seems like a good idea, because you want to know what they want from their website and so forth. So you say, what do you want your website to do? But it's one of those things that it's just not the right question to ask, because they don't really know what they want, and it puts you in the wrong position. And then it sort of devalues the entire meeting, because it puts you into this position where you're just offering technical skills to do stuff. And so that's kind of question number 1 that can really derail the meeting. The second question, which is kind of a similar question, is like, how many times have you gone to a meeting and you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't have any idea what these people want, what kind of budget they have in mind, but in order for me to be able to figure out what kind of services that I can offer, I need to know what kind of budget they have in mind. And so you ask, what is your budget? And that's a terrible question to ask in the beginning of a meeting, because kind of like we were just talking about, like if you ask somebody what they want their website to do, they don't know what they want their website to do. They might have a couple of ideas that sort of to get the ball rolling, and then their budget that they come to the table with initially is kind of wrapped around those initial ideas. And so if you say, what is your budget? And they come back and say $800 or $500 or something like that, then on one hand, it's helpful, because you're thinking, okay, well, here's a list of things that I can do for $500, versus if they said $5,000, this is a different set of things. And so, a lot of times, you're good, you don't mean to cause any problems. You're not trying to, offend anyone, or you're not trying to do anything bad, but you ask, what is the budget? And then, your intent is you want to know, like, what is like the pool of skills and time and resources that you can pull from in order to achieve the goal of running this project. And so when you ask, so what is the budget, then your intention is to be able to say, okay, here's how I can better serve the client. But the problem is, in the same way we just talked about that first question, the problem is they don't know what they want, and so therefore their budget is going to be really, really low. And then on top of that, this is one of those situations where, like for example, just last Monday we were talking about the very same issue. When I posted, when we talked on Tuesday, we were talking about the $7,700 WordPress project that I sold on Monday night with a Google Doc. And when that client initially called me on Friday, so it was a 2-day call. We talked initially on Friday, and then on Monday we closed the deal. And when we initially spoke, I said, they said to me, right out of the bat, we have about, between $500,000. I think she said $800 was, kind of their mark for their budget for doing this sort of thing. I didn't even ask what the budget was. She just offers it. She said, we got about $800. Can you help us figure out how to do something with this website? And of course, as we all know from Tuesday, they ended up with a $7,700 project. So how does that happen? And it happens by not answering the question right away and putting the questions in the right order, so that when you get to things like this, everybody's on the same page. So like if in your mind you have a concept of like a lot of different things that could be offered, but in their mind they're only seeing a really small chunk of it, when you ask what's the budget, everyone's on different pages. And so that kind of leads into the third question. And the third question is, how much does this cost? Now, the third question is a question that oftentimes comes from your client to you, as opposed to the first two questions, which might be the way that you kind of kick off a meeting. So like if you it would be on you, like you sit down in a meeting and you say, well, what do you want your website to do? What is your budget? Those two questions instantly will derail your meeting for a variety of reasons. But this next one is, how much does this cost? And that question is almost always asked at some point in the meeting, but if it's asked too soon, then we run into the same kind of problems that we were just talking about, where your idea of what you could be doing and their idea of what it's all going to cost is totally different, because the outcome is different, the deliverable is different, the project is different. Those are all different things. And so wouldn't it be better if you could push that question off until the end, where everyone's on the same page now? So anyway, those three questions come up in almost every single client meeting, and if you handle them at the wrong time and in the wrong way, then it just derails things. And the big things, just to kind of summarize, the big things that it derails your position of authority. Because like you're not trying to like heavy hand somebody into doing something, but you want to be seen as the leader. Like if you want to run a high value WordPress business, you can't be the kind of person that just shows up and says yes when your client lists a bunch of things that they want you to do. That's what you get on Upwork. That's what you get on Fiverr. That's, these job boards, these outsourced tech departments, that's what they do. And you can't compete with that. It's a low value type of thing to do. And it really isn't serving your client. It's not really helping you. It's a lose for everyone involved, because your client is busy running their business. They haven't taken the time to figure out what kinds of things they can do online. They don't know about all the online stuff that's available. And so therefore, if you're in this kind of outsourced tech department role, that's going to be a low value kind of thing. And so what you want to do is you want to shift into a role of leading your client into successful ventures. And when you ask questions like, what do you want your website to do and what's your budget, if that's in the beginning, then it's assuming that they know the answers to these questions already without having gone through any sort of an exploratory phase in the meeting. So, and then of course, if they ask you the question, like right up in the beginning, how much does this cost? The same exact issue will arise, where you're pricing out a product or a service that's entirely different from the product or service they have in mind. And so if you throw out a big number like $5,000, and they've done any kind of research and they know that the average project on Upwork is like $194, or the average WordPress site is about $1,000 to develop, and you go 5 times that, then you've derailed the entire project, and then you have to backtrack and explain all the differences and try to recover from that point forward. So better than doing all of those 3 things up front, all of those questions are questions that do need to be answered throughout the course of the meeting. Otherwise, you wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't know what their budget was, and they wouldn't know what things cost. Obviously, you need to know the answers to those questions, but the way that you unfold it throughout the meeting is a really, really critical thing. So for example, this past Monday, as I was going through these very questions with my clients, I followed a really specific pattern for doing this that is a very successful type of a thing. So if that's the kind of thing that you want to work on, if you want to work through how to run these high value client meetings, how to ask the questions that really need to be asked when they need to be asked, so that you can get the information that you need to be able to serve your clients more deeply than you currently are doing. So for example, if you're one of these people that tries to ask, just come tell me what you want for your website and I'll do it, or tell me what your budget is and I'll see what I can fit into that amount. If that's the kind of pattern that you're going on, then you're leaving a lot of money on the table. And even worse than that, you're not actually serving your client as deeply as you could be and as successfully as they really want you to be doing. So anyway, so those are the kind of the 3 red flag questions to keep in mind with regard to client meetings. And if you want to talk more about how to find your target market, how to find your ideal clients within that market, how to run these high value client meetings, then let's talk about that. So I've got my calendar online, as you may know, at doublestack.net/call, and you'll see a bunch of times and appointments. So you can book a call. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes. And we'll talk about tell me about a situation where your last meeting, and we can go over how did that go, what was the outcome, did you close the deal, did they have objections that you weren't able to successfully handle, what are some things that you could go over to kind of smooth out that process. So we can talk about all of those things, like not just focusing in on your target market, but focusing in on how you actually run these high value client meetings, and of course that then evolves into the prices that you can charge for your services. So if that sounds like something you want to work together on, head over to doublestack.net/call, and we'll talk for about 45 minutes and see if there's some stuff that we can do to get things going better for you. So head over to doublestack.net/call, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Here's a high five. Boop. And I'll see you on Tuesday, unless we talk before then. Take care.